Hello and welcome back to the channel. So today we've got a model here, the Churchill Mk VI from AFV Club Models. This was supplied to me from the by the Tank Museum to build and explain a couple things about their model show that's coming up, and also we've got a discount code for the store. So we'll get to that in a little bit, more on that later, but starting off, just showing you how the model goes together. It's actually got metal springs, and the suspension does work, and it's quite a nice feature, albeit a little bit complicated to start with and a little bit daunting to actually to look at. But when you get into it, trust me, it is actually it's no problem really. It's reasonably straightforward. As you can see, the springs actually hold the bits in place so they don't go flying off, giving you time to glue the other side in. So it's all clipped in, and they're not flicking out or anything. It's pretty solid. And then just with a little shuffle and get the other side in, and that clamps those together, and we can leave them all working. We don't run glue in between where they are, obviously. Clamp it all down, make sure they're moving, and let the glue set up. And that's one part. That's the easy part, shall we say. Obviously the Churchill suspension is reasonably difficult and complicated however you go about it. There's obviously a lot of wheels. You can see one's just pinged off there. These are designed with, one has got a shaft that you push through the hole, and that joins everything up really, the actual wheel, and then you put the other side on, just clips on. So this is one side built up, and we've had to drill the holes there for those large sort of shaped bolts that are on the outside, bolt heads. Now we've got to make up, I don't know what this would be called, it's just part of the suspension. It's like the surround of the suspension that goes between what you've just looked at, and they all make up small little bogies inside. So we have to glue on the front section. It all seems a little bit, you think, why don't just mould it in one bit? It's because there's an AFV Club have done nearly every version of Churchill that's out there, so certain ones have different things, so they've factored that in from the beginning. Hence, the ones that have a different front, you've got the different front, so you've got to glue on a different front even if you're not using that. Now this is a little bit finicky, but they do go in fine. You glue all of those bits in, which are like the separators, and then you need to kind of line them up. And the only way to do that is to start at one end, glue two, make sure it's sort of fixed, and then work back through like that. And we get these like little swing arms, which are part of the suspension, and it all looks a bit fiddly, but there's just enough bite in all the fitting, and there's enough tightness in the joins that it actually holds enough for you to get it all together. And like I said, so we clamp these two with my thumb and finger, and you just glue those two, and then you just work back like that. I think I actually did the first two, the last two, and then worked back along the middle, just sort of spreading it and clipping it in. You just need to take your time and make sure all of the parts are obviously facing the right way, and you're good to go. You can see I've run to the back now there, and just using the Tamiya Extra Thin, the quick setting, really, it's hold it for 30 seconds and it's good to go. It holds it enough, then you can just squeeze the bits in. As you can see, that's not actually clamped glued, so there's enough spring there, and you just make sure that the joins are horizontal, run a bit more glue in there, keep it all working, and come the end you've got the piece constructed, and then that's going to go around the other piece that we just did. They're really like two sponsons, are they, or bogies? The two sections of the Churchill that have got the running gear. It's quite a complicated running gear. It's very British looking. It's almost sort of arcing back to the kind of Mark IV First World War tanks. Now, as you can see, again, it's fiddly, but keep at it, and once you've got it all aligned, it will just clip in. Now, with the springs being tensioned, you can see that there's a bit of a gap as to where this section's meant to join on. So you've got to clamp that down, and the best way I could find to do it is to push it down and run in super glue, and then that just gets you the bite. So you can get that on, say, every third section, just so it's where it needs to be, and then you can run your plastic glue in. You don't see this anyway. Even at the end, I was looking for this, and I couldn't see any of these glue marks. You don't need to be, too neat. You just can't see up in there. It doesn't show up. And there you can see I just clamped it then. There's like a little ridge just behind where that's joining, and that it needs to sit just on the edge of the raised section and just in front of the ridge. And it's very hard to show you, but if you're at this point, you'll see what I mean. And if it's right, it clips in nicely and goes down level. If you haven't got it quite right, it will sit there either floating or it won't go down flush. So just move it back and forth and you'll see it will clip in then. And then when you're there, that's when you want to glue it. And then we push the wheels through with the rod on it, and or the shaft, and that joins everything together, and then your suspension is working. You don't need to put any glue in there. You just glue the one wheel on the section of the other one with the shaft. And now we're just test fitting the tracks here just to make sure it all works. These are not gluable tracks as in plastic glue. You've got to use super glue. Easy enough, just plaster on the super glue, let it go off, and then you should have enough strength there to get the tension around. So obviously what we've got on the one I just showed you is the sprockets. So we've got to get and add those bits. First off, we've got these rails that extend just out, and there's a gap on when you get the final sort of fenders on, there's a gap. You can see this, so it's worth taking your time at this point. And this just continues the rail, and it looks as though it's going to go on wonky, but if you get it right and take your time, it will straighten up and it all sort of fits. It's quite effective. It's a sort of finessed part, really. And that's what you find with this AFV Club model. You've got the Tamiya kit, which does the Mark VII, and that's okay for a basic build, but this one takes it right up to another level. I was looking at photos come the end just to check some weathering, and every part I could see on the tank was on this model, and it's just remarkable. Even tiny little bolt heads, everything. I'm just showing you this polycap because it's on the end of the tracks and it's easy to miss. You could be looking through where is it, and it's just on the end of the tracks. So you cut that off, and that's for your sprocket. We're just getting the section there to take the sprocket on, and that just clips in. There's a little bit of a rail that sticks out again. You just clip it in between. And then we've got the front sprocket as well. I believe this one... Oh, of course it is. Yeah, it's rear sprocket driven, sorry. So it's driving from the back, and the front one is really a sprocketed idler, I guess. At the front, this one. And now we've got the two sections that joins between, and they get glued on. And again, as with this model all the way through, you look at the joint and you think, oh, that's going to be a bit tricky. But it's not. There's just enough there for it to hold. It's quite cleverly engineered. You just got to take your time and make sure it's in the right spot before you glue it. And if you get that right, it's no problem. And here we've got, it's like a little chute. It's like a chute for the crud that comes out of this little gap here as it runs onto the idler, which you get the same thing on other tanks at the other end, where you get sort of plates that scrape off the tracks before it goes onto the idler. So it's sort of doing the same thing. It's letting it chuck it out the side, and that's just a chute for it to run down. Nice for the weathering, and we'll get to that at the end. So this is again a point where I was thinking, right, this looks a little bit dodgy, but it's not. It all clips in fine. You just got to trust the process, and you see you get the sort of the two sides, and when it all clips in, it's perfectly leveled. It's all fine, but it looks a bit daunting. We do get photo etch with this one, and it adds an incredible amount of detail, and that was just adding the sections on the back. Jumped ahead a little bit here because it's really just gluing down doors, and I wanted to keep the video a little bit short, so that upper section just fits fine. It just clips in. There is a little section that you might want to check. You just got to dry fit that whole top deck to where it joins the front and the rear section, and all the doors and everything on the top fit in fine. Everything clips into exactly where it's meant to go. But you just want to take your time. If you find it doesn't quite fit, just try moving out the glasses plate and the bits at the front and the sections at the back, and you'll find it will just wiggle in. It's just quite a tight fit. Getting the tracks aligned here as well, again, simple stuff. You don't see any of the top run, you only see the kind of rear sections, rear and front section, so you don't have to worry too much, but there is a little bit where you can get some sag, and I did glue that in where you can see through from the side, but obviously you don't need to. Now the one of the best points of this kit is the fenders and how they've gone about it. So you can remove all of them and you can show off the tracks, and that happened at certain points. Usually with like the Mark IIIs and the earlier Marks, they used to take the fenders off and you see the whole run of the tracks. But you can have odd sections off. That did happen. So you could put this front section on here, which I'm showing, which just slots into that one spot, and there you can see that's the dust chute as well, that sort of curved section. That's where it throws it all out. And quite clever, you see those two raise points that join up with those bolt heads, and that helps you align it all. So you could have that section on and say not have the front fender on and leave this section that I'm doing now, because they all just bolt on as different parts. But I've put them all on because I just wanted to do it like the box art, to be honest. So we just join those sections on. It kind of slots under and then clips on, and then you've got the rear portion as well. And then we've got the curved sort of mud guards or fenders at the back there, and they all just slot in. Now I did need to run a little bit of filler in here because the way it's designed, it just makes for an ever so slightly difficult join. So I went for getting this bit I'm holding, the side piece, glued on where I wanted it, and then worry about the join at the back. And we've got the front fenders going on there as well. These two raised sections on it, they're actually just sheet metal, and you can see through them, so I cut them off at the end. I don't show this, I did this just before I started painting it. I just bent the shape out of some sheet etched metal. So we've got the turret, we've got a join there from the top and the lower section of the turret, and we've got a bit of moulded in cast texture, but I wanted to enhance that and get rid of that join as well, which is meant to be there, but it's not. It's like a cast join, but it's not that pronounced, so I don't think we need to worry about it on the model. Just the stippling technique with Mr. Surfacer. I use 1200, it'd probably be better to have 1000. You can use 500 as well if you really want to build it up. But 500's a lot thicker, so you want to be sparing with that. And just, mix it up, go all around. And I went around the side of the model as well, looking at reference, just found where the texture looked cast on different points, and I added it on. We've got the metal gun barrel glued in there as well, just super glued in, nice and straightforward. And this brings us up to the section now where I want to talk about why this video exists and about Bovington Tank Museum. So there's a bit of footage coming up now where I'm just sort of showing you through the completion of the build and showing you the different points of this model where there's a little bit of detail, there's photo etch, and you can see all of that. And now we'll talk a little bit about the Tank Museum. So first off, the main reason behind this video is to promote the model show that's going to be at the Tank Museum on the 19th and 20th of February. Now, this is a great model show. I've been going there for a few years. I will be there this year. I will have this model, so I'll be there with my Spanish Civil War group, and also I'll be next to my club that I'm also the chairman of as well, which is IPMS South Somerset. So this model will be on the IPMS South Somerset stand, so come along and have a look if you're thinking about attending. Now, the model show is really good because it covers so many different aspects. It's not just tanks for a start, so you've got all types of different models. And we've also got, they've got some outside areas as well where they do RC displays, which is really quite interesting. You get the tanks running around making a lot of noises. It's very inclusive as well, so modelers of all ages and all skills will find something extremely interesting from the model show. There's lots of exhibitors from all over the country, and there's also traders from all over the country, so there's plenty on offer, as well as the fantastic model shop at Bovington as well. Now, it does sound like I've been given the model from Bovington, I've got to say this, that and everything else. I just want to make the point that I've been going to the model shop since the beginning of the lockdown, which is when they started ramping it up, and that's online generally. And I find it quite surprising just how much of a selection they've got. I mean, they've given us a discount here to use, which is AFV 10 in the shop. There's a link in the description as well, which will take you right to a filtered out part of the shop that has the code applied and will just show you the AFV Club models. Now, there's enough range just on AFV Club to offer a discount. You'll be amazed at the different types of manufacturers that they've got there, and it really is quite something when you get into it. They've pretty much got every model you'd want, and even some that are very hard to get hold of, which I'm quite surprised by, because they're trying to obviously cover the tanks they've got in the exhibition. So not only do you get, if you come on down to the show, you get all of that, you get to look around the model show and everything. You've also got museum itself as well, which is obviously, there are obviously going to be stalls in front of tanks, but the tanks are still there and you can get around them where you can. So it's well worth having a think about. If you're in the local area, I'm 45 minutes away, so I think it's very apt that I'm promoting it. But like I said, I'll be down there. If you're local, you're thinking about it, it's well worth coming on down too. So I hope to see you there. And if you do, come on over to the IPMS Spanish Civil War SIG, Special Interest Group that is, or IPMS South Somerset, and say hello to me as well and let me know what you thought of the video. And if you did like the video and you do like what's happening here, go ahead and let Bovington know as well on their social media pages or wherever you see this video shared, because they're going to pop it out as well, and that would be good to give them feedback, let know that you've seen it too. So back to the model. So now we're ready for the painting, and to start off, I do what I always do when I'm using MRP paints and start off with a base coat of Tamiya. So I've just gone over it just to get some colour down really and get some darkness in the shadows with XF61, which is dark green, and then we're going over with the MRP lacquer paint, which is SCC15, which is the correct British green basically. Now this is obviously sped up. There's only one way to do MRP, and that is slowly and methodically, and if you do it in a little cloud pattern like this and you go on through, you will end up with a really nice result. So I've just got a bit of footage here where you can see me putting it on. So this is the idea. This is ×2 speed, so it gives you an idea of how fast I'm doing it. So just go on slowly, build up the colour, take your time, do it over a couple of sessions if it's not your thing sitting there for an hour or so, and you will have a very nice effect afterwards. It's kind of like a marbling effect. It's really quite good, I think, anyway. And now we're ready for the decals. Now these, I should have done what I've done in the past, I don't know why I didn't, is cut around the carrier film. So I usually, with the squadron markings that you can see at the back there, I would cut around that square. I would cut around the shield. I didn't, and it did come back to bite me because the carrier film did show up. No matter what I did, I got under there. It's not silvering, it's just presumably the thickness of the carrier film. You're looking at the green behind it and it's changing the shade so it stands out. Never mind, it's not a problem. I think we got away with it here and there, but they go down very nicely, but they are quite sort of sticky. Some decals are like that, like you put them down and they do not move. Whereas other ones, like cartograph decals, you put them on, you can slide them around, you've got all day before you get them in position and then you set them down. So just be wary of that. Put plenty of liquid and you'll find it will move. Here you can see the result. Now, I think that shows that there's not really any weathering done on this yet. And as you can see, that's just the effect that you get from the MRP over that dark Tamiya colour. There's no visual effects here, and I think you get that kind of just false shadowing, I guess. It just adds interest to an overall green tank. So we're into weathering. We're using the ammo washes here, which are great. Enamel washes straight out the pot. What more do you want? Ready to go in the colours. Tells you where to put it. You just point and do it. So this is the track wash. Funny enough, this goes on the tracks. And I just... looks like I'm plastering it on, which I am, I guess, in this point. I'm just trying to get the colour down, but just, be wary that it splashes everywhere, and you don't want to put too much on because it can have problems eating into certain things. So just be sparing. I'm just trying to get it coated on. And if you get any going on the wheels or anything, then you can go back over with some thinners and just wipe it off. So now we've got the dark brown wash for green vehicles. Again, it really is as simple as that. And you go around, and this is a pin wash. So we just add this. We don't put this all over the model. We just add this in specific little points to highlight areas. It usually works best around recessed and raised areas. So I'm just going around these recessed bolts here, and I've gone around the whole of the vehicle at this point, and you start to see the definition come through, and that's what you want. So it's like a panel line wash. You go all around, and then you just wipe it back once it's dried after an hour with some thinners. We're just going around some raised bolt detail here, as you can see, around these hinges, and it's the difference it gives. It just gives it definition. If you look at this side to the far side, it's a lot in your face, and then you can wipe that back and it makes it more subtle. Now obviously you turn your tank around, and there you go, weathering complete. It's as simple as that. I always like to do one side when I'm doing this, just to get my eye in so I don't start making mistakes, and show you how I do it. And that's the tracks there as well. So that's one side completely done. Now you could say that's over the top, but I kind of like where I was going, so we went on with it, and I'm reasonably pleased with it. It's a dirty tank, so this one's just gone through some puddles through Normandy, and it hasn't decided to clean itself off. So that's what I've gone for, and you'll be happy to see we got one side clean, so you can see how I did it. Now the only difference here is I've done a mist coat. So this is a bit of an old school technique, I guess. It's still perfectly relevant, but it's something you would have seen in magazines sort of 10-15 years ago, is getting Tamiya buff, very, very thin, sort of 90% thinner to Tamiya buff, and you just mist it up, and it gives you the initial sort of dust coat. It's that dust line that you get. You sometimes get it on wheeled vehicles. When they're running down a dusty road, you get a kind of dust line appears. So that just gives you the sort of base for what we're about to do now. So ignore the pigments that are coming out of that dust chute. I did it this side to test it, and I'm going to do it the other side to show you. So I just got it mixed up. What we're going to do here is splashes, really. We're going to use some of the Ammo MiG splashes bottles, and we're going to go on and we're going to add some splashes. Now initially this looks very heavy and very messy. You just got to go with the process, really, and see where it takes you. That's how I find weathering works. I start with an idea, and we just see where it goes, and it always ends up okay. You're never going to ruin the model. It might take you down a route that you weren't expecting. So if you wanted a clean finish, you start doing this, you're not going to be getting a clean finish. But just sort of trust the method, and you'll be all right. If you don't like it, you can actually blend this in with thinners, so it takes away all the splashes. People are often sort of a bit hesitant with weathering, and I think you just got to jump in and go for it. So I'll go over initially with one colour with these splashes, which is what I'm doing now, on some heavy ones, and we just pull them down as far as if they're sort of streaking. So they got wet and they've run down the side of the tank. Big flat metal sides. A tank doesn't care where it's going, go through hedges, puddles, mud. It's not thinking about where it's going and what it looks like. This will happen. There will be scratches, there will be messy points. This access door here, I'm trying to sort of make it like hands have opened it and shut it, so it's smudged all the mud around the edge. Just kind of enjoy it, and go with it. And I think I was really, really happy with how this came about. I thought about it far too long. I just sort of got on and did it, and I was a lot happier then. And it made it a lot better. So you can spend as much time as you want adding this sort of detail that I'm doing here with a fine brush. Just add some streaking, and you just work that methodically all the way down the side and around the tank, around the back and the front. And then the more you do it, the more detail you'll get. And the more times you sort of do little bits like I'm doing here, then that adds a little bit of interest to that point. And then as you look at the model, you start to see all those points add up, and it adds a lot more interest, and it's visually pleasing. And where I've wiped some of the splashes away, then I add a few more on top as well, and just keep it going, really. A lot of that went on over the top of the model, and I just went over with a large brush and neat thinners before it dried, and just wiped it in, and that gives this kind of dusty effect. You can just see blurry at the top there. We're just adding splashes to the tracks here and the lower running gear. Now we turn the tracks over as well, and we add some more detail. The thing with tracks is get sort of 5 or 6 kind of different colours, and the more colours you can build up, the better it is. It makes it really it gives it depth. And this is what I was saying earlier about the splashes hitting the top. Just go over with the wide brush, neat thinners, and just wipe it in and around. It just adds like a dust wash then. It's actually really quite good. It's almost like a filter, a bit like a dot filter. Now, obviously, you don't want it to go all over the top. It did. I turned it over and thought, oh, right, better sort that out. And with enamel, you wouldn't want to leave it all day. If it was oils, you could come back 3 days later and wipe it all off. But these enamels do bite in on this matte surface. That's a point. Forgot to say, after the decals, it was hit with a matte coat. So all this is done over the top of a matte coat. And now we're on to the pigments. We're going to do this dust shoot here. So first off with pigments, I like to get them in where I want them. So get a nice heavy brush and just get the pigments where I want them. So that's in and around. And then when I'm happy with the actual point of where I want them, that is when I go in with neat thinners and I just tap it at the edge and let it sort of capillary action soak through. And then that will help fix them then. So that's a good way around that. And it gives a nice effect. It's a very pleasing effect, but you've got to let it dry then. So this is, do this last thing in your session, leave it overnight. Because if you touch it when it's wet, it will smear it and you'll lose all of the effect that you want. Because we want it to dry and leave that kind of raised, caked on earth kind of look. And you can see there as well, actually in the shoot, a little bit more difficult. I needed a heavier brush, because I'm starting to move the pigment and you start to squash it down and then it just becomes like a very heavy pigmented wash. That's what you don't want. You don't want that smearing. Now I've got a heavier brush that's all splayed out, so I get it's just as useless as the brush I had before, which was too small. This is just going everywhere, but I get there in the end. And it's a very tight angle to be working on. So and if you've done that and you've pushed down the pigment, you just add a bit more. You just tap it in, add a bit more, and then it should only stick to the wet areas. You can blow the rest off with an airbrush or tap it back into the pot. And then it should be pretty effective. Once it's dry, you can then manipulate it. So this is the next day and it's dried on. You get that colour come back, which is what we started with, because it goes very, very dark when you make it wet. And now you can just hit into it, and it's only just holding enough that it's not too much of a problem. So if you tap it, you'll actually clear it back and get some of the green to come back through from the actual model. And we're trying to tell a story here, that this is shooting out the dust from the side. So that's all we need to do is make it look realistic. And that just, the more detail you can add, the more likely it's going to be realistic. So the more you can kind of take your time with it. It's very easy to rush weathering. The more I've rushed this a little bit, I've got to be honest, but I had a deadline. So the more time you can take, the better. And it always shows up then. The longer you've taken, the more you've put into it, the better it shows up. So there you go. It's a very, it's almost like a scrapyard tank, but I got a feeling they look like this at many points during World War II, so I'm not too worried about that. And that brings us to a close. So I think it's a very detailed model. Now, as I was saying, this is part of the discount code, so you can grab this model from the Tank Museum online shop, and they've got quite a lot of Churchills on there. Actually, they've got the Mark III, which is a lovely kit, very early Churchill, and they've got the brand new Mark VII as well, and this is the Mark VI. So plenty on offer there, plenty to choose from. So if you do want to get involved and you do want to have a look at that, the links are down below for the online shop and the discount code. Go ahead and use that if you feel like giving it a go, because there's no better shop really to support than the Tank Museum, because it all just goes into funding the museum. I think it's a good way for us modelers to help out, because we all like to use the Tank Museum's reference, I'm sure, when we're building tanks. So giving a little bit back always helps. And if you are local and you want to head on down, then I'll see you down at the Southwest Model Show on the 19th and 20th of February. Do come over and say hello. If you've got any feedback, let me know in the comments down below. Let Bovington know. You can send them an email through the contact us, or let them know on their social media pages. And I hope you enjoyed the video. And as usual, thanks for watching. Thanks for staying tuned to the channel. If you haven't already, consider subscribing and liking the video. And I'll see you in the next one.